So when we're talking about an individual's behavior, and we could say, well, how could they do something so horrible? How could they do something so vile? Well, the thing about behavior is anybody can do just about anything because anybody can justify what they're doing. They can justify their behavior. This is called cognitive dissonance theory. To reduce discomfort, we can justify our behavior. For example, the soldiers in the background, when they were asked, well, how could you do something so horrible? Well, now they need to justify their behavior. And they want to reduce discomfort. So they'll tell you, well, I was just doing my job. It was part of what was happening. It wasn't me. If we take two rival gangs and we asked one of them, well, how could you do something so mean, so corrupt? And they'll say, well, we didn't start the war. They started the war. So they're going to justify their behavior, and anyone can do it at any time, and we all do it every single day. They might ask you, well, why didn't you clean up your room? I had asked you to clean up your room, and you'll say, well, I had a lot of work to do. I had a lot of homework. And you know you were supposed to do it, but you want to justify why you didn't. So you say, well, I had a lot of work to do. And although that might be true, you really are just defending your feelings and justifying why you didn't do it. Now, speaking about these soldiers in the background, do you think that all of them felt hatred toward people that were Jewish? Every single one of them? All of them? Let's clarify something. Let's talk about discrimination and prejudice. Now, when it comes to discrimination and prejudice, they mean different things. People think they mean the same thing, but in actuality, they don't. So, when it comes to World War II, there was a lot of discrimination going on. But not every single soldier felt prejudice. Prejudice comes from the word to prejudge. So discrimination is an action. Prejudice is an attitude. So although the soldiers did discriminate because they had to, because it was part of their job, many of them were actually not prejudiced. Every single person feels some sort of prejudice, but they don't discriminate. For example, there's some seniors in high school. They are prejudiced against freshmen. They think that they're immature. They run down the hallways to get to the cafeteria, running at full speed, and they're immature. Now, they don't discriminate against them, but they do feel prejudice. Let's talk about an experiment that you need to know. Make sure you write down Dr. Solomon Asch. And he was talking about how groups can influence behavior. And he did something that was a conformity test. The conformity test is very, very simple. Here's a line. And if I asked you which of the following lines matches Exhibit 1, well, you would look at it. You would say, okay, well, I'll go with letter A. However, if you were in a room full of strangers and there were 8 people ahead of you and all of them said B, now, these are hired actors. And now many people are going to feel, well, they need to conform to the group. And instead of sticking to their gut and saying A, they might just go along and conform to the group, and they might say letter B. 33% of the people they would go back and forth. They would sometimes be right and sometimes go with the group. 40% of them gave more right answers than wrong answers. Only 25% always stayed true to the real answer. So Dr. Solomon proved in a very simple test that sometimes people go along with the group just to fit in, just because they don't want to feel awkward in the group. The Dr. Solomon Asch experiment is a very well-known and famous experiment. Let's look at another one. Dr. Stanley Milgram, and he was trying to show the power of the authority figure. So what happened is people were tied. And you can see here, there are electrodes, and people were told, now every time this man gives a wrong answer, he will be shocked. The question was, how many people would go along with shocking another human being if they simply gave a wrong answer? That's what Dr. Stanley Milgram was trying to find out. Well, what happened was, he discovered that if you removed the responsibility and said, hey, no, it's not you, you don't worry about it. I'm taking the responsibility. You are just, here we go, doing your job. When you remove that responsibility, and you tell people, hey, when he's wrong, just give him a shock, people are likely to go along with it because they feel like they're not responsible. And Dr. Stanley Milgram was showing the power of the authority figure. Now, here's a girl named Louise Ogburn. And what happened to her was she became a victim. An individual was calling several different fast food restaurants, and he was pretending to be a police officer. But in actuality, he wasn't. And he would tell the managers of a fast food restaurant, hey, do you have a young girl working the cashiers? And of course, there was always a young girl. It's fast food. It's Wendy's. It's McDonald's. The caller on the phone would say, I need for you to conduct a strip search. And I need for you to do it on behalf of me. I'm an authority of the law. I can't be there, but I need for you to conduct a strip search. So many people would go along with it because they felt, well, I'm not responsible. It's not me. It's this police officer on the phone. Here is Louise Ogburn in a McDonald's office. She simply has an apron on. Here we see her shoes. So the manager was conducting a strip search, and you could say, well, how could they do that? Once again, an authority figure on the phone was saying, well, I need for you to do this. So we see the power of the authority figure, and when you remove responsibility, how people will carry out actions. When you get a chance, you might want to pause the video, and here are more details on Louise Ogburn and what happened to her when she was working that day. Now, let's talk about the concept of groupthink. This happens a lot, especially with teenagers, but really it happens with all ages. The definition, groupthink, going along with the others to avoid conflict. Everyone is saying an idea and presenting an idea, and maybe you don't want to go along with it, but just for the sake of going along with the group, you say, well, maybe we should do it. For example, you may have been in this scenario. You're hanging out with a bunch of your friends. It's 2 a.m, and whenever it's 2 a.m, teenagers suddenly get the idea, hey, you know what? Let's go to the island. It's already 2 a.m. It's already late. You've already had a good time. And some people are saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we go to the island? Now, if you don't feel like going, you might just go along with the group. But here's something I'm going to have to tell you. If you don't feel like going, what I promise is that if you go first, and if you speak up, someone will always follow your lead. The problem is, someone has to go first, and it's going to have to be you. Once you bring it up, someone else will also follow your lead. The bad news is, it's going to have to be you. You're going to have to break the chain of group think. That's going to be your responsibility. For example, I was once in Austin with my best friend and his brother, and we were going to go to a concert at night, and they kept wanting to go to different stores throughout the day, and I was already tired, and I said, please just drop me off, and when we're ready to go to the concert, pick me up again. I later asked my best friend, hey, so did you have a good time? He said, you know what? I should have just followed your lead. I wanted to stay and rest, but I didn't want to disappoint the activity. So only through speaking up, you're going to have to break the chain of groupthink. Now, when it comes to groups, we can get into a lot of trouble. Here we have a truck. Now, a long time ago, when I was a teenager, my best friend picked me up in the truck. It was a Saturday. It was like 11 a.m. And he said, hey, let's go for a ride in the truck. And I said, okay. He took me out to a road that had an elevated, where the railroad tracks, the road would make a ramp. And he said, hey, you want to jump the ramp? And I said, well, sure. I mean, you're the one that's driving. And he sped up and we drove and we flew in the air and then we landed. And it was it was pretty cool. And then he drove home and he said, all right, I'll see you later. And I thought, that's odd. He picked me up simply to jump in a truck. He could have done it by himself, but he didn't. He picked me up. He wanted to do it with another person. That's called risky shift. Engaging in riskier behavior than you would alone. The reason your parents always ask you, well, who are you going with? Who's going to be there? They know the concept of, well, if you're with a group of people, you are more likely to do something that's irresponsible. So when I think back to that time, why did my friend pick me up? He could have done it all alone. Well, he wanted some friends, specifically me, to encourage him to do it. Risky shift.